Welcome to Block 13 of our Celebrating the States Block of the Month. This is our version of the Kentucky block, also known as the Kentucky Crossroads block. You will need light, medium, and dark fabrics. From a 2.5 inch by width of fabric strip of a light fabric, cut 12 squares that measure 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches. Cut the remainder of the strip down to 1 7/8 inch wide and cut 5 squares that will measure 1 7/8 by 1 7/8. From the medium fabric, cut 1 square that measures 7 3/4 inches by 7 3/4 inches. You will bisect this square twice, corner to corner, to get 4 triangles. Next, you will need to cut a section that is 4 5/8 inches wide. From this, you will cut 4 rectangles that will measure 1 7/8 by 4 5/8. From the dark fabric, you need to cut 12 squares that measure 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches. Cut the remainder of the strip to 1 7/8 inch wide, and then cut 4 squares that are 1 7/8 inch by 1 7/8 inch. From the dark fabric, you also need to cut 2 squares that are 4.5 inches by 4.5 inches. You will bisect this once, corner to corner, to get 4 triangles. Now that we have all our pieces cut, it's time to sew. Make sure you're using 1/4 inch seam allowances. We're going to start with the 2.5 inch squares. Place a light colored square right sides together with a dark square. I'm going to use my diagonal seam tape to help me sew a 1/4 inch away from a diagonal line that goes right through the middle, corner to corner. If you don't have the diagonal seam tape or a similar product, you can draw a line with a pencil or a pen, corner to corner, and then just sew a 1/4 inch away from it on both sides of that line. If this is the first state block video you've seen, check the description below for a quick link to the playlist for all the other states that are in this series. We will be featuring one state or territory a month until we've completed 56 blocks for a quilt with a setting that is 7 blocks by 8 blocks. Once you've finished sewing a 1/4 inch away from the center on both sides of that line, cut between the sewn lines to get 24 half square triangle blocks. I usually just grab my scissors and cut them apart, or you can do it with the rotary cutter. Now it's time to press. You want to press all of these towards the darker fabric. Now it's time to head to the cutting table. We need to trim all of these squares to 1 7/8 inch by 1 7/8 inch. I like to use my block lock ruler to help me get these trimmed perfectly. While I don't often like to use the 1 7/8 inch measurement or 1 3/8 inch measurement, those kind of off measurements, I like to use the more 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch measurements. When I was testing this block, this measurement worked the best, so that's what we're sticking with this time. Now you need to make piles of 4 blocks. This will help keep things organized as we sew these together for the pieces for the block. We are going to sew sets of 3 squares together. We are going to make 4 of each set, and the sets will be a mirror image of each other. I recommend sewing one set at a time and make sure your seam ripper's handy because I had to use it once on mine. Just sew them all through. Keep double checking as you send them through the machine that you have them facing the right way. Once you've sewn the first set, make sure that when you sew the second set, you have a mirror image of the first set. I know this block looks a little tricky when you first look at it, but when you break it down into smaller steps and just take one piece at a time, it's not so bad. Once these sections are put together and pressed, they should measure 1 7/8 inch by 4 5/8 inch. Now it's time to get these pieces pressed. You want to press all of the seams in one direction. It doesn't matter which direction. I just pressed them kind of towards a lighter fabric. That seemed to work for me, but if you want to press them the other way, that would also work. Now it's time to piece the medium 1 7/8 inch by 4 5/8 inch rectangle between these two sections. We invite you to hit the like button, share the video with your quilting friends, leave us a comment, and make sure to subscribe so that you can see all the future Celebrating the States videos. Many of you have been sharing pictures of your blocks on our Facebook group called The Quilted Forest Friends. When we post the video there, you'll share the picture underneath it, and we love seeing those. All the different colorways that people are doing, it's been fantastic. So if you get a chance to look at those videos and the pictures on there, we sure would appreciate it. Now it's time to press towards the medium fabric. Once you've had these pressed, these should measure 4 5/8 inches by 4 5/8 inches. Now we're going to add the dark triangles to the top of this square. You're going to make it kind of look like a tree, so all the triangles should be pointing up, and you're just going to center it, kind of try to get in the middle. It's okay if it's not perfect because we'll trim it later to make it perfect. Be careful not to stretch the triangle as you're sewing it onto the square. And then when you're done sewing, it is time to press towards the darker fabric. Okay, the hardest part of this block is now done. So we'll make a quick little 9 patch and then we can finish it off. Use the 5 white 1 7/8 inch squares and the 4 dark 1 7/8 inch squares to make a 9 patch. As I sew this block together, I don't really feel like getting up to go to the ironing board, so I'm just going to do a finger press so that I can keep sewing and not have to get up and press. Press towards the darker fabric. That way, when you put the pieces together, they'll nest together and make it easier to sew. Once this block is done and pressed, it should measure 4 5/8 inches by 4 5/8 inches. For this 9 patch block, you want to press away from the center row. Next, we're going to sew the units we made first onto opposite sides of the 9 patch unit. And then on the other 2 units, you're going to sew triangles to the opposite sides of those units. When you sew the large triangles to those first units that you made, Line up the top edges and the right edges even. Try not to stretch the triangle as you sew it on, but only worry about the two edges. Don't worry about the diagonal part. Little triangles will hang off the edge at the bottom and on the sides, but just keep sewing. Yay, there's only 2 seams left, but we need to press first. On these units, you need to press towards the triangles. Press carefully so you don't stretch them out of shape, and then trim off those little extra bits that hang off the edge of the sides. For the center section, you want to press towards the 9-patch unit. This will help later on when we're sewing the rows together so that the seams will nest. To do these last 2 seams, I highly recommend pinning. I first pinned at the corners where the 9-patch meets the triangle that's on the edge. I'm going to pin those 2 areas first, and then you're going to pin the 2 in the middle. And these are both going to face the same direction, so you want to pin so that you can get these lined up and they won't shift as you're sending them through the machine. Make sure to trim off the extra little triangles that hang off the sides of the seam and then press away from the center row. Use some spray starch if your block needs a little convincing to lay flat. The last step is to trim the block to 12.5 inches by 12.5 inches. My ruler has a center marked, so it's the 6.25 inch line, so I'm going to line that up so that it hits the corner markings from corner to corner on that center square. So those should be lined up on the 6.25 inch mark, and the center should be right in the middle. I'm going to trim 2 sides, and then because I have a table that I can walk all the way around, I'm going to go around to the other side to trim the last 2 sides. That way I don't have to move the block or the ruler to get it trimmed all the way. I think this would be a great block for a scrappy quilt. It would be a lot of fun to see all those triangles be different colors, and the corners could all be the same but have the scraps run through the block. It would be a lot of fun. Here's another sample of the block I made. This was my test block and I did it all in blue. This is a reminder for you to hit that like button, share the video with your friends, leave us a comment about what you like about the block, and make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching and happy quilting!